There are encounters that make no sense, unless you believe in past lives. Marina thought she was conducting a normal job interview, until Gabriel walked into the room. The moment their eyes met, something inside her shattered and rebuilt at the same time. It was as if her heart recognized a soul her mind had forgotten. What happened next revealed a powerful truth. Some connections stretch across centuries, defy death, and return when we're finally ready to heal what other lifetimes could not. And this story proves it, not only through the reunion of two lovers who found each other across 3 different lives, but through the presence of a third soul, a child who, from the spiritual plane, guided this family long before he was born. If you've ever felt like you knew someone before you met them, this story will hit you hard. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it so more people can discover that love never ends. It simply waits to be found again. There are people who cross our path and, without understanding why, we feel we've known them for a very long time. It's as if the heart recognizes before the eyes do, as if something beyond reason whispers, "This soul has been with me before." Marina experienced this on an ordinary Tuesday morning, when she was interviewing candidates for a position at the company where she worked. He walked into the room, greeted her politely, sat across from her, and in that instant, something inside her trembled. It wasn't physical attraction, it wasn't professional admiration. It was pure, inexplicable, frightening recognition. She tried to focus on the scripted questions, but her hands were sweating cold and her voice faltered on the simplest words. Gabriel, the candidate, also seemed disturbed, though he disguised it better. Their eyes met and looked away too quickly, as if both were fleeing from something they couldn't name. When the interview ended, Marina extended her hand to say goodbye, and upon touching him, she felt an electric shock rise up her arm, a wave of heat that left her dizzy. Gabriel felt it too. His fingers hesitated over hers for a second longer than would be appropriate, and he left the room with a pale face, his breathing accelerated. That night, Marina couldn't sleep. Lying in the dark, she felt an inexplicable anguish tighten her chest, as if she had lost something precious without knowing what. Fragmented images invaded her mind. A dirt road, a wooden house, a man with his back turned calling her name in desperation. She didn't recognize those places, but she recognized that voice. It was Gabriel's voice, she was certain of it, though it made no sense at all. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed she was in another place, in another time, wearing old-fashioned clothes and running after someone she loved more than life itself, someone who was leaving and would never return. The next day, Marina discovered that Gabriel had been approved and would start working on the same floor as her. The news filled her with a strange mixture of joy and terror, because a part of her knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that this man was not a stranger. He was someone she had loved, lost, and searched for through entire lifetimes. And now, without understanding how or why, destiny had placed them face to face again, separated only by an invisible veil that was slowly beginning to tear. The weeks that followed were a delicate torture for both of them. Gabriel and Marina worked in the same building, shared the same cafeteria, crossed paths in hallways that suddenly seemed too narrow for the weight of what neither dared to say. Every encounter was a silent battle between approaching and retreating, between the desire to understand what they felt and the fear of discovering the truth. He would catch himself staring at her during meetings, noticing details that shouldn't matter, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, the exact tone of her laughter, the small scar on her left wrist that, inexplicably, made his heart ache. She, in turn, found herself inventing excuses to pass by his desk, just to feel that strange electricity in the air, that sensation of being home in the presence of someone she barely knew. One evening, Marina stayed late at the office finishing a report. The building was almost empty, the silence broken only by the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew. When she stood to leave, she found Gabriel in the hallway, also heading out. They walked together to the elevator, and in those 30 seconds of waiting, the tension between them became unbearable. "I know this will sound crazy," Gabriel finally said, his voice barely a whisper, "but do you ever feel like we've met before? Not here, not in this life, but somewhere else." Marina's heart stopped. She turned to look at him, and in his eyes she saw the same confusion, the same desperate need for answers that consumed her every night. Before she could respond, the elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside. The descent was silent, but something had shifted. The wall of politeness they'd built was crumbling. When they reached the ground floor and walked out into the cool night air, Marina stopped and faced him. "I've been dreaming about you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Every night since the interview. I dream of places I've never been, times I've never lived, and you're always there. Always leaving, always saying goodbye, and I'm always too late to stop you." Gabriel's eyes widened, and he took a step closer. "I dream about you too," he admitted. "But in my dreams, I'm the one who can't reach you. I'm calling your name, but you can't hear me. It's like there's a wall between us, something keeping us apart." That night marked the beginning of something neither could control or fully understand. They started meeting secretly, not as colleagues or friends, but as two souls desperately trying to piece together a puzzle that spanned beyond this lifetime. Marina began researching, diving into books about reincarnation, the spiritual plane according to Spiritism, life after death from different perspectives. She learned that some souls are bound by unfinished business, by loves that transcend the physical, by promises made in other existences. Gabriel, more skeptical at first, couldn't deny what he felt when he was near her. It was as if his very essence recognized hers, as if they were two halves of something that had been broken long ago and was now, impossibly, trying to become whole again. But neither of them knew yet that their connection went deeper than past lives, that it involved not just what they had been to each other before, but what they were meant to become. Marina's research led her to a small spiritual center on the outskirts of the city, a place recommended by a coworker who practiced meditation and studied the spiritual plane. The medium who attended her was an elderly woman named Helena, with kind eyes that seemed to see through the veils of time itself. When Marina explained her situation, the inexplicable connection, the dreams, the feeling of recognition, Helena listened without judgment, nodding as if she'd heard similar stories 1,000 times before. "Some souls," Helena said gently, "are bound by threads stronger than death itself. They find each other again and again, across different lifetimes, because there's something between them that remains incomplete." Marina's hands trembled as she asked the question that had been haunting her. "How do I know if this is real? How do I know I'm not just imagining all of this?" Helena closed her eyes and remained silent for a long moment, as if listening to voices Marina couldn't hear. When she opened them again, there was a profound sadness mixed with compassion. "The man you're connected to has loved you in 3 different lives," she said softly. "In the first life, you were separated by war. He was a soldier who never returned from battle, and you spent the rest of that existence waiting for him, never knowing he had died calling your name. In the second life, you found each other again, but circumstances kept you apart. Social barriers, family obligations, the cruelty of a world that didn't understand your love. You both died with that regret burning in your hearts, the knowledge that you had been so close yet couldn't be together." Marina felt tears streaming down her face, though she didn't remember starting to cry. "And in the third life?" she whispered. "In the third life," Helena continued, her voice heavy with emotion, "you were together. You married, built a home, planned a future. But it was cut short. An accident, sudden and brutal, took you from him when you were carrying his child. He survived, but the grief destroyed him. He spent the rest of that life consumed by guilt, believing he should have protected you better, that your death was somehow his fault. When he crossed over to the spiritual plane, his soul was so weighted down by that guilt and pain that he couldn't move forward. He remained trapped, watching over the place where you had lived together, unable to accept that you were gone." The revelation hit Marina like a physical blow. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The dreams where Gabriel was always leaving, the feeling of incompleteness, the inexplicable ache in her chest whenever she looked at him. Helena reached across and took Marina's hands in hers, her touch warm and grounding. "You've both been given another chance, child. The spiritual plane doesn't just punish or judge. It also heals, it also teaches. Your souls have been working through these patterns, learning the lessons that love demands of us, Faith, patience, forgiveness, and most importantly, the courage to try again despite the pain of the past. But here's what you need to understand. Gabriel doesn't consciously remember these lives, just as you didn't until now. His soul knows, his heart recognizes you, but his mind is still caught between worlds, between the memory of who you were and the fear of losing you again. As Marina left the spiritual center that evening, the city lights blurred through her tears. She knew that everything was about to change. She had to tell Gabriel what she'd learned, had to help him understand why their connection felt so powerful, so inevitable, so terrifying. But she also knew that remembering past lives wasn't always a gift. Sometimes it was a burden, a weight that made moving forward even harder than staying in the safety of forgetting. Marina waited 3 days before telling Gabriel what she had discovered. 3 days of carrying the weight of 3 lifetimes, of looking at him across the office and seeing not just the man he was now, but the soldier who never came home, the forbidden love who couldn't break free from society's chains, the husband who had lost everything in a single tragic moment. When she finally asked him to meet her at a quiet park after work, her voice on the phone was so serious that he agreed immediately, sensing that something fundamental had shifted. They sat on a bench overlooking a small lake, the setting sun painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, and Marina told him everything. The medium, the 3 past lives, the guilt that had trapped his soul between worlds, the child they had lost together in another existence. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. Disbelief, recognition, fear, and something that looked almost like relief. When she finished, he sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, staring at the water as if searching for answers in its depths. "I should think you're crazy," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "I should laugh this off, make some joke about past lives and reincarnation being nothing but fantasy. But I can't, Marina. I can't because every word you said resonates with something deep inside me, something I've been trying to ignore since the moment I walked into that interview room. I've had this feeling my entire life, this sense that I was waiting for something, or someone, and that until I found them, I would never be complete." He turned to face her, and in his eyes Marina saw tears threatening to spill over. "There's more," he confessed. "Things I haven't told you because I thought they made me sound insane. Since I was a child, I've had this recurring nightmare. I'm in a house, and there's smoke everywhere, and I'm trying to reach someone, trying to save them, but I can't move fast enough. I can hear screaming, can hear someone calling my name, and I wake up with this crushing guilt, this feeling that I failed to protect the person I loved most in the world. My therapist always said it was just anxiety, childhood trauma manifesting in strange ways. But it wasn't, was it? It was memory. It was my soul trying to tell me what happened, trying to make me understand why I've always been so terrified of losing people I care about." The dam broke then, and Gabriel wept, not the quiet, controlled tears of a man trying to maintain composure, but the deep, wrenching sobs of a soul finally releasing centuries of accumulated grief and guilt. Marina held him, and as she did, she felt something shift in the air around them, as if the spiritual plane itself was witnessing this moment of recognition, this healing that spanned across time and space. "We don't have to carry that pain anymore," she whispered against his hair. "We've been given another chance, Gabriel. We found each other again, and this time, nothing has to separate us. No war, no social barriers, no tragic accidents. Just us, here, now, with the wisdom of everything we've been through and the freedom to choose differently." But even as she said these comforting words, both of them felt a tremor of uncertainty, because the universe that had brought them together 3 times before had also torn them apart 3 times, and neither could shake the fear that history, somehow, might repeat itself once more. 6 months into their relationship, Marina began experiencing something that defied all rational explanation. She would wake in the middle of the night with the overwhelming sensation that someone small and gentle was standing beside her bed, watching her with eyes full of love and longing. At first, she dismissed it as dreams bleeding into waking consciousness, the product of an overactive imagination stirred by all the talk of past lives and spiritual connections. But the presence grew stronger, more insistent, until one night she clearly saw the outline of a child. A boy, no more than 5 or 6 years old, with features that were hauntingly familiar, a perfect blend of her own face and Gabriel's. The boy smiled at her, reached out a translucent hand as if to touch her cheek, and whispered words that chilled her to the bone. "Mommy, I've been waiting for you both to remember." Marina sat up gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs, and knew with absolute certainty that this was not imagination. This was the child she had been carrying in that third life, the baby who had died with her in the accident that had torn Gabriel's world apart. She had never told Gabriel about these nocturnal visits, afraid of adding more weight to the burden he already carried, but now she realized that keeping silent was causing more harm than sharing the truth. The next evening, when Gabriel came to her apartment, she took his hands and told him about the boy, about the visits, about the message. She watched his face go pale, watched his lips tremble, and braced herself for denial or disbelief. Instead, Gabriel's eyes filled with tears of recognition. "I've seen him too," he whispered. "I thought I was losing my mind." Gabriel revealed that for weeks he'd been experiencing strange moments, walking past a playground and hearing a child's laughter that made his chest ache with inexplicable love, dreaming of teaching a little boy to ride a bicycle, waking with the sensation of small arms wrapped around his neck in a hug. "I kept telling myself it was just my subconscious processing everything we'd discovered about our past lives," he said, his voice breaking. "But it felt so real, Marina. It felt like memory, like something I'd actually experienced. And the strangest part is that whenever I saw this child in my dreams or felt his presence, I didn't feel sad. I felt complete, like a piece of my soul that had been missing had finally come home." They sat together in silence, both understanding that they were dealing with something far beyond the ordinary, something that existed in the delicate space between the physical world and the spiritual plane. Helena, the medium, later explained what was happening when Marina and Gabriel visited her together. "Your son exists in the spiritual plane," she told them gently. "He's a soul that never had the chance to fully incarnate in that third life, but he's not lost or suffering. He's been watching over both of you, waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, for you to be together again." Children who pass before birth or in early childhood often remain close to their parents, especially when there are unresolved bonds. He's trying to tell you something important. He wants to complete his journey, to have the experience of life that was cut short before. Marina and Gabriel looked at each other, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them, an understanding that would change everything. They were being offered more than just a second chance at their own love. They were being offered the opportunity to bring their child into the world again, to heal the deepest wound of their shared past. But with that gift came a terrifying question neither wanted to voice. What if bringing him back also brought back the tragedy that had destroyed them before? The decision to have a child together was both the most natural and the most terrifying choice Marina and Gabriel had ever faced. On one hand, every fiber of their being seemed to be pulling them toward this destiny, toward completing what had been left unfinished across multiple lifetimes. On the other hand, the shadow of past tragedy loomed large, and both struggled with the fear that history might repeat itself in cruel and unpredictable ways. Gabriel, especially, found himself paralyzed by anxiety. What if something happened to Marina during pregnancy? What if the universe that had taken them from each other 3 times before wasn't done testing them? These fears manifested in his dreams, where he relived that fatal accident over and over, always unable to prevent it, always waking up drenched in sweat and guilt. Marina understood his terror because she shared it, but she also felt something he didn't, the growing presence of their son in the spiritual plane, becoming more tangible with each passing day. The boy appeared to her more frequently now, not just at night but in moments of meditation, in the quiet spaces between thoughts. He would show her images, a nursery painted in soft blues and greens, a mobile hanging above a crib with stars and moons, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger. These visions filled her with a profound peace, a certainty that this time would be different, that they had learned the lessons they needed to learn. "He's ready to come to us," she told Gabriel one morning as they sat having coffee. "I can feel him waiting, so patient, so full of love." "He's not afraid, Gabriel. Why should we be?" Her words pierced through his defenses, and Gabriel finally allowed himself to imagine a future without tragedy, a life where they could be a family without the universe tearing them apart. They decided to try, and when Marina discovered she was pregnant 3 months later, the joy was profound, but so was the vulnerability. Every doctor's appointment became a test of faith, every small symptom a potential cause for panic. Gabriel became almost obsessively protective, insisting Marina rest more, worry less, avoid anything that might pose even the smallest risk. It would have been suffocating if Marina didn't understand where it came from. This wasn't just a nervous first-time father. This was a soul carrying the weight of having lost his family once before and being determined not to let it happen again. As the pregnancy progressed, something extraordinary began to happen. The veil between the physical and spiritual planes seemed to thin, and both Marina and Gabriel started experiencing moments of profound connection with their unborn child. During meditation sessions that Helena guided them through, they could sense his consciousness, his excitement, his absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Gabriel, who had been so consumed by fear, began to feel something else emerging: hope, pure and radiant, the kind of hope that can only come from a soul that has traveled through darkness and finally glimpsed light. "I think I understand now," he told Marina one night, his hand resting on her growing belly. "We weren't brought back together just to relive the past. We were brought back together to transcend it, to prove that love is stronger than any tragedy, that some bonds can't be broken no matter how many times the universe tries." And in that moment, they both felt a gentle kick from within, as if their son was agreeing, as if he was saying, "Yes, this time, we'll make it right." The 7th month of pregnancy brought with it a phenomenon that even Helena, with all her years of spiritual experience, had rarely witnessed. Marina began having what she called reverse memories, vivid experiences of seeing her own life from her son's perspective in the spiritual plane. She would close her eyes and suddenly be floating above her own body, watching herself from a distance, seeing moments from her childhood, her adolescence, her adult life, all through eyes that weren't her own. In these visions, she understood that her son had been watching over her for years, long before she met Gabriel in this lifetime, waiting patiently for the moment when the two souls he belonged to would finally find each other again. "He chose us," Marina told Gabriel, her voice filled with awe. "Before we even knew we were searching for each other, he was already guiding us together." Gabriel had his own experiences, though different in nature. He began to hear a voice during his morning meditations, young and pure, speaking truths that no child should know. The voice told him about the process of reincarnation according to Spiritism, about how souls in the spiritual plane prepare for their return to Earth, about the careful planning that goes into choosing parents and circumstances that will provide the lessons needed for growth. "I waited so long for you to heal, Dad," the voice said one morning, and Gabriel wept at hearing himself called by that title. "I watched you in the spiritual plane, saw how the guilt was eating you alive, how you couldn't forgive yourself for what happened. I wanted to come back to you and Mom sooner, but you weren't ready. You had to learn that death isn't an ending, that life after death is just another chapter in an eternal story." These communications intensified as the due date approached, and both Marina and Gabriel found themselves living in two worlds simultaneously: the physical reality of preparing a nursery, buying baby clothes, attending childbirth classes, and the spiritual reality of communicating with a consciousness that was both ancient and innocent at once. Their son shared memories with them, fragments of that third life they had shared together, the joy of their wedding day, the moment they discovered Marina was pregnant, the plans they had made for their future, and yes, even the accident itself. But he showed them these memories without pain or trauma, instead revealing them through the lens of spiritual understanding, showing them how even tragedy serves a purpose in the grand design of soul evolution, how their separation had taught them lessons about impermanence, attachment, and the true nature of love. One evening, exactly 1 week before Marina's due date, all three of them, mother, father, and unborn child, seemed to merge into a single consciousness during a particularly deep meditation. In that sacred space, their son spoke to them clearly, his message both a comfort and a promise. "I recognized you both before I was born because we've always been connected, across all lifetimes, through all separations. I am not just your child. I am part of your shared soul journey, a living bridge between your past and your future. When I'm born, I'll forget most of this, just as you forgot until you found each other again. But deep down, in the place where souls remember, we'll always know. We'll always recognize each other. When they emerged from that meditation, both Marina and Gabriel were crying, but these were tears of gratitude, of completion, of finally understanding that the spiritual plane had never been punishing them. It had been preparing them for this moment, for this reunion that crossed not just worlds, but lifetimes themselves. The birth came on a Tuesday morning, just as the first light of dawn was breaking through the hospital windows. Marina's labor was long and difficult, testing every ounce of her strength and Gabriel's faith, but throughout the ordeal both of them felt an inexplicable calm, as if invisible hands were supporting them, guiding them through each contraction, each moment of pain. Gabriel held Marina's hand and whispered encouragement, but he was also aware of another presence in the room, something luminous and protective hovering near them, what Helena had once described as spiritual guides who attend the moment when souls cross from one plane to another. When their son finally emerged into the world with a strong, clear cry, the room seemed to fill with light that had nothing to do with the overhead fluorescence, and both parents felt a wave of recognition so powerful it took their breath away. They named him Ethan, and from the moment the nurses placed him in Marina's arms, it was clear that this child was extraordinary. His eyes, still unfocused in the way of all newborns, seemed to look directly at his parents with an awareness that transcended his minutes-old existence. When Gabriel leaned down to kiss his son's forehead for the first time, he felt a jolt of memory so intense he had to steady himself against the hospital bed. Suddenly he was back in that third life, holding this same child, feeling this same overwhelming love, except then it had been tinged with the bitter knowledge that their time together would be cut short. But this time was different. This time, Gabriel could feel the possibility of a future stretching out before them, unwritten and full of promise. The first few weeks with Ethan brought moments that defied conventional understanding of infant behavior. He would stare at empty corners of rooms and smile, as if seeing visitors his parents couldn't perceive. Sometimes Marina would wake in the night to find him quiet and alert in his crib, not crying or needing anything, just gazing peacefully at the space above him as if watching something beautiful unfold. "He's still connected," Helena explained when they brought Ethan to meet her at 3 weeks old. Babies are natural bridges between the physical and spiritual worlds. They haven't fully forgotten where they came from yet. The door between planes is still half open for him, and he's experiencing both realities simultaneously. As he grows older, that door will gradually close, and he'll forget his time in the spiritual plane, just as we all do. But for now, he remembers. One night, when Ethan was about 6 weeks old, Gabriel was rocking him to sleep when the baby suddenly reached up and touched his father's face with his tiny hand. In that instant of contact, Gabriel experienced something that would change him forever, a vision, clear and undeniable, of himself as he had been in the spiritual plane after that fatal accident in their third life together. He saw himself trapped in grief and guilt, unable to move forward, watching the empty house where he and Marina had lived, waiting for her to come home even though some part of him knew she never would. And then he saw something else, a small, luminous presence approaching him in that darkness, a child made of light who had taken his hand and said, "Dad, she's not gone. She's just ahead of us, waiting for when you're ready to let go and move forward. And I'm here too. I'll always be here, waiting for both of you to find each other again." Gabriel gasped, tears streaming down his face, understanding now that even in the darkest moment of his soul's journey, his son had been there, had been guiding him toward healing, toward this moment of reunion. The door between worlds was closing slowly for Ethan, but before it did, he had given his father one final gift, the memory of how love, even beyond death, had never abandoned him. As Ethan grew from infant to toddler, the half-open door to the spiritual plane gradually closed, just as Helena had predicted. By his second birthday, he no longer stared at empty corners or smiled at invisible visitors, and the uncanny awareness in his eyes had softened into the normal curiosity of a young child discovering the world. Marina felt a bittersweet ache watching this transition, knowing that her son was forgetting the spiritual realm he had come from, forgetting the communications they had shared before his birth. But she also understood that this forgetting was necessary, that to fully experience human life, one must be present in it without the constant awareness of other planes, other existences. Yet there were still moments, fleeting and precious, when the veil would thin and Ethan would say something that proved the memories weren't completely gone, just buried deep. One afternoon, when Ethan was 3 years old, he was playing with toy blocks in the living room while Marina folded laundry nearby. Suddenly, without prompting, he looked up at her and said, "Mommy, I remember when you were sad." Marina's hands stilled on the towel she was holding. "When was I sad, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Ethan scrunched up his face in concentration, searching for words to describe something that existed beyond language. "Before I was born. You were looking for Daddy, but you didn't know where he was. And I was trying to help you find him, but you couldn't hear me yet." Marina's heart clenched, tears springing to her eyes as she knelt down to her son's level. "And did I find him?" she asked, though she knew the answer. Ethan nodded seriously. "Yes. I helped. And then I could finally come be with you both." Gabriel had similar experiences, moments when Ethan would reveal knowledge he couldn't possibly have in the normal course of things. Once, while looking at old family photos, Ethan pointed to a picture of a house Gabriel had lived in during college, years before Marina or Ethan were part of his life. "That's where you were so lonely," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "You were waiting for us, but you didn't know it yet." Gabriel felt goosebumps rise on his arms, because that assessment was painfully accurate. Those college years had been marked by a profound sense of incompleteness, a loneliness that no amount of friends or activities could fill. How could his 3-year-old son know that? The only explanation was that Ethan had indeed been watching from the spiritual plane, had indeed been aware of both his parents' journeys long before he incarnated. These moments became less frequent as Ethan grew older, but they never completely disappeared. What emerged instead was a different kind of knowing, not memories of past lives or the spiritual plane, but an intuitive understanding of his parents that went beyond normal child-parent bonds. He could sense when Marina was having a difficult day before she showed any outward signs, would climb into her lap and say, "It's okay, Mommy. Everything always works out." He knew when Gabriel was struggling with old fears, would take his father's hand and lead him to the window to look at the sky, as if reminding him of something vast and eternal beyond their immediate concerns. Marina and Gabriel would look at their son and see not just the child he was, but the soul he had been, the one who had waited patiently through lifetimes, who had guided them together, who had chosen to complete this family circle that death had once broken. And in those moments of recognition, they understood that love truly was eternal, that the bonds forged between souls transcend time, space, and even death itself, returning again and again until the lessons are learned and the circle is complete. When Ethan turned 5, Marina began experiencing a series of vivid dreams that brought her face to face with their first life together, the one where Gabriel had been a soldier who never returned from war. These weren't the fragmented, symbolic dreams she'd had before meeting him. These were complete narratives, playing out night after night like episodes of a story she had lived but forgotten. In these dreams, she was a young woman named Catherine, living in a small village, waiting by the window every evening for a man named Thomas to come home. She could feel Catherine's hopes slowly dying with each passing month, could feel the way her heart hardened against the pain of not knowing whether he was alive or dead, could feel the bitter resignation when she finally accepted that he was never coming back. The worst part wasn't his absence, it was the not knowing, the way grief couldn't fully process without closure, without a body to bury or final words to cherish. In the dreams, Marina's Catherine went through the motions of life in that village, eventually marrying another man out of practical necessity rather than love, bearing children who would never know their mother's heart truly belonged to someone else. She watched herself grow old in that life, watched the light in Catherine's eyes dim year by year, watched her die still holding on to a faded letter that Thomas had sent from the front lines, the last proof that he had once existed, that their love had been real. Upon waking from these dreams, Marina would lie in the darkness feeling the residual grief of that life, understanding now why Gabriel's soul had been so weighted with guilt. He had died calling her name, knowing she would spend the rest of that existence waiting for him, and from the spiritual plane he had watched her suffer that incomplete grief, unable to reach her, unable to tell her what had happened. She didn't share these dreams with Gabriel at first, not wanting to reopen old wounds or burden him with more guilt. But the dreams intensified, becoming so vivid that she would wake up disoriented, not sure which life was real, her current one as Marina with a husband and child, or that past one as Catherine, forever waiting by the window. Finally, one morning after a particularly devastating dream, she broke down at breakfast and told Gabriel everything. She expected him to be upset, to sink back into the guilt he'd worked so hard to overcome. Instead, his face crumpled with a different emotion, relief mixed with sorrow. "I've been having the same dreams," he confessed. "I've been Thomas, dying in a muddy trench, trying so hard to hold on long enough to get back to you and failing. Every night I relive those final moments, calling your name, and the worst part is feeling my consciousness rise out of my body and realizing I can see you, can see our village in the distance, but I can't reach you. I'm trapped between worlds, between life and death, watching you wait for me and being powerless to end your suffering." That evening, they went together to see Helena, desperate for guidance on how to heal these resurfacing memories. The medium listened carefully, then smiled with a knowing sadness. "This is the final stage of your healing," she explained. "Your souls are ready now to fully process and release the trauma of that first separation. Before, when you first found each other in this life, you weren't strong enough to face it. But now, with Ethan here, with your family complete, with the proof that love does endure and souls do reunite, now you have the foundation to look back at that pain without being destroyed by it. The spiritual plane is giving you the opportunity to grieve what was lost, to forgive yourselves and each other, and to finally let Catherine and Thomas rest." She instructed them to do something unconventional, write letters to their past selves, letters that Catherine and Thomas never got to exchange, letters of closure and forgiveness. "Once you do this," Helena said, "the dreams will stop. The door to that life will close gently, peacefully, because you'll have given those souls what they needed most, the goodbye they never got to say, and the knowledge that their love story didn't end in tragedy after all, it just paused until they were ready to find each other again." The letters took Marina and Gabriel 3 days to write. They sat together each evening after Ethan was asleep, pouring their hearts onto paper, writing words that spanned across centuries to reach the souls they had once been. Marina wrote to Thomas, the soldier who had died, calling her name, telling him that she understood now why he never came home, that she forgave him for leaving, that his love had been worth the wait even if it took lifetimes to be fulfilled. Gabriel wrote to Catherine, the woman who had spent her life by the window, apologizing for the grief his absence had caused, thanking her for keeping their love alive in her heart, promising her that he had never stopped searching for her, even from beyond death. When they finished, they took the letters to a quiet place by a river and, following Helena's instructions, burned them together, watching the smoke rise and disperse into the sky, carrying their words to whatever realm Catherine and Thomas now inhabited. That night, they both slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in weeks. When they woke, there was a lightness between them, as if a burden they'd been carrying had finally been lifted. But the real confirmation came from Ethan. That morning at breakfast, their son looked up from his cereal and said something that made both parents freeze. "The sad people are happy now." Marina set down her coffee cup carefully. "What sad people, sweetheart?" Ethan tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. "The ones who look like you and Daddy, but older. They were standing by my bed last night, holding hands, and they were smiling. The lady said to tell you thank you, and the man said everything is okay now." Marina and Gabriel exchanged glances across the table, both feeling tears prick their eyes. Catherine and Thomas had received their messages, had finally found peace, and somehow, impossibly, their 5-year-old son had been the bridge that allowed them to communicate one last time. As Ethan grew older, his role as a bridge between the physical and spiritual planes became more subtle but no less significant. He seemed to have an innate understanding of the spiritual concepts his parents had struggled for years to grasp. When he was 7, he asked Marina out of nowhere, "Mommy, do you think the spiritual plane is far away?" Marina, caught off guard, asked him what he meant. "I don't think it's far," Ethan continued thoughtfully. "I think it's right here, just like another room in the same house." And sometimes the door opens a little bit, and people can see between the rooms. That's why you and Daddy could feel me before I was born, right? Because the door was open. His simple explanation was more profound than anything Marina had read in countless books about life after death. The spiritual plane wasn't distant or separate, it was intimately close, separated only by the thinnest of veils. Gabriel found himself learning as much from his son as he had from any spiritual teacher. One evening, when Ethan was 8, they were stargazing in the backyard when the boy asked, "Dad, are you still scared?" Gabriel knew immediately what he meant. The old fear of losing his family, the trauma that had carried over from past lives. He started to give a reassuring answer, but Ethan interrupted gently. "It's okay if you are. But you know what I learned." Gabriel waited. "I learned that even when people go to the other side, they don't really go away. They're just in the other room, like I said. And someday we'll all be in the same room again. So there's nothing to be scared of really. We're always together, even when it doesn't look like it." In that moment, Gabriel realized that his son, this soul who had waited through lifetimes to reunite with his parents, was now teaching them the final lesson they needed to learn, that death was not an ending to be feared but simply a transition, a doorway between rooms in the eternal home where all souls eventually gather, where all love stories eventually find their completion. As the years passed and Ethan grew into adolescence, Marina discovered that her connection to the spiritual plane hadn't faded with time. If anything, it had deepened and refined itself. She began to have experiences that went beyond dreams or visions, moments when she seemed to exist simultaneously in both the physical world and somewhere else entirely. It would happen during meditation, or sometimes during mundane activities like washing dishes or driving to work. Suddenly she would feel herself expand beyond her body, aware of the room around her but also aware of another dimension overlapping it, a place of light and consciousness where souls moved freely, unbound by physical limitations. At first, these experiences frightened her, making her feel ungrounded and uncertain of what was real. But gradually, with Helena's guidance and her own growing understanding, she learned to navigate these moments without fear, to walk between worlds with intention rather than confusion. Gabriel watched his wife's transformation with a mixture of awe and concern. There were times when Marina would be sitting beside him on the couch, physically present but somehow also far away, her eyes distant and luminous, her breathing slow and deep. When she returned fully to her body, she would tell him about the things she'd seen, souls preparing for reincarnation, spiritual guides attending to newly arrived spirits, councils of wise beings discussing the lessons and challenges that different souls needed for their growth. She described the spiritual plane according to Spiritism not as a single place but as many levels or spheres, each corresponding to different stages of spiritual evolution, each offering different lessons and opportunities. "It's not about judgment," she explained to Gabriel one night. "It's about learning, growing, healing the wounds we carry from life to life. And the most beautiful part is that we're never alone in it. We're always surrounded by others who love us, who guide us, who wait for us to be ready for the next step." Her ability to walk between worlds became something of a gift to others. Friends and acquaintances, hearing about her experiences through quiet word of mouth, began seeking her out for guidance. She helped a grieving mother connect with her deceased son, not through dramatic seances but through quiet meditation that opened a space for communication beyond words. She helped an elderly man overcome his fear of death by showing him glimpses of what awaited beyond the physical, the peace and reunion with loved ones who had gone before. Marina never claimed to be a medium in the traditional sense. She didn't go into trances or channel entities, but rather she had learned to thin the veil deliberately, to create moments where the spiritual plane became accessible to those who were ready to experience it. Gabriel watched her do this work with growing pride, understanding that his wife's sensitivity to the spiritual realm wasn't a burden to be managed but a gift to be shared. But there was a cost to walking between worlds, and Gabriel saw it taking its toll. Marina began to seem increasingly ethereal, as if her connection to the physical world was loosening even as her connection to the spiritual deepened. She would forget to eat, would lose track of time, would sometimes look at familiar objects as if seeing them for the first time, as if she was forgetting what it meant to be fully human. One evening, Gabriel found her standing in Ethan's doorway, watching their sleeping teenager with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her. Marina leaned into him, her voice barely a whisper. "I can see both sides of him. The boy he is now and the ancient soul he was before, the one who waited so patiently for us. And I can see all the lives he'll live after this one, all the lessons he has yet to learn. Sometimes I forget which is real, this moment, or all the moments that came before and will come after. Gabriel, I'm scared I'm losing my grip on this world, that I'm becoming more spirit than flesh." Gabriel held her tighter, understanding that the gift of walking between worlds carried with it the danger of forgetting which world you truly belong to, at least for now. Marina's struggle to stay grounded in the physical world reached a crisis point on a cold December evening when Ethan was 14. She had been meditating in her room, a practice she did daily now, when Gabriel heard her cry out, not in pain but in a sound that was almost like recognition, like someone calling to a long-lost friend. He rushed upstairs to find her collapsed on the floor, her body trembling, her eyes open but unseeing. For a terrifying moment, Gabriel thought he was losing her, thought the universe was once again taking from him the person he loved most. He gathered her in his arms, calling her name desperately, and slowly, so slowly, Marina's eyes focused on him, consciousness returning like someone surfacing from deep water. "I went too far," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I let myself drift too deep into the spiritual plane, and for a moment, I forgot how to come back. I could see the other side so clearly, Gabriel. It would have been so easy to just stay there." The incident shook both of them profoundly, and they returned to Helena seeking help. The elderly medium, now well into her 80s, listened to Marina's experience with grave concern. "You have a rare gift," Helena said carefully, "but gifts can become curses if we don't learn to use them wisely. You're not meant to live fully in the spiritual plane yet, Marina. You have work to do here, in this life, in this body. You have a husband who needs you, a son who needs his mother, and souls who need your guidance from this side of the veil, not the other." She placed her weathered hand over Marina's heart. "The secret isn't to stop walking between worlds, it's to always remember your anchor. Every time you step into the spiritual plane, you must tie yourself to something here, something that will always call you back. For most people, that anchor is love, love for the people waiting for them in the physical world." Gabriel became Marina's anchor in the most literal sense. They developed a practice where, before Marina entered deep meditation or any work that might take her consciousness into the spiritual plane, Gabriel would hold her hand, creating a physical connection that kept her tethered to the physical world. He would sit beside her, sometimes for hours, his fingers laced with hers, his presence a constant reminder that she had a home in this world, in this life, in this moment. And it worked. With Gabriel as her anchor, Marina could explore the spiritual realm without losing herself in it, could walk between worlds without forgetting which one she belonged to. She began to understand that the interview with Gabriel all those years ago hadn't just been about finding a soulmate from past lives. It had been about finding her partner in the truest sense, the person who would keep her grounded while she soared, who would hold the rope while she descended into depths others couldn't reach. Ethan, watching his parents navigate this delicate balance, began to understand his own role in their soul family more clearly. One evening, he sat down with them both and said something remarkably mature for his 14 years. "I think I get it now. Mom can see the spiritual plane because she needs to help people understand that death isn't the end. Dad keeps her safe because he learned in other lives what it means to lose someone and never wants to experience that again. And I'm here because I'm the proof that what you both believe is real, that souls really do come back, that families really do reunite across lifetimes. We're not just a family. We're a message." Marina and Gabriel looked at their son, this wise soul in a teenager's body, and realized he was absolutely right. Their reunion, their story, their family, it wasn't just for them. It was a testament to something larger, a living proof that the spiritual plane isn't separate from physical life but intimately connected to it, that life after death isn't just a comforting belief but a reality that shapes and guides every moment of our existence, whether we're aware of it or not. Years passed, and Marina and Gabriel settled into a rhythm that honored both the physical and spiritual dimensions of their existence. They had learned to balance Marina's gift with the demands of ordinary life, to walk between worlds without losing themselves in either one. But on the evening of their 15th wedding anniversary, something extraordinary happened that would remind them just how powerful their connection truly was. They had gone to the same park where Marina had first told Gabriel about their past lives, sitting on that same bench overlooking the lake, now watching the sunset paint the water in colors that seemed almost otherworldly. Gabriel reached for Marina's hand, and the moment their fingers touched, the world around them seemed to shift, not dramatically, but subtly, as if reality itself had taken a gentle breath. Marina felt it first, a surge of energy that started at the point where their hands connected and radiated outward, waves of light and warmth that she could see with her spiritual vision even as her physical eyes remained focused on the sunset. The energy wasn't contained within their bodies but extended beyond them, creating a luminous field that pulsed with each beat of their synchronized hearts. She looked at Gabriel and saw him surrounded by that same light, saw threads of silver energy connecting their hearts, their minds, their souls, threads that stretched beyond this moment, beyond this life, back through all the lives they had shared and forward into all the lives yet to come. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice trembling with awe, "can you see it? Can you see what happens when we touch?" Gabriel couldn't see it the way Marina did, but he felt it, a sensation like electricity and honey flowing through his veins, a warmth that seemed to originate from somewhere deeper than flesh and bone. He had felt hints of this before, in moments of intimacy, in quiet mornings waking beside her, but never with this intensity, never with such clarity that it couldn't be dismissed as imagination or wishful thinking. "What is it?" he asked, his own voice hushed with wonder. Marina struggled to find words adequate to describe what she was perceiving. "It's our souls recognizing each other," she finally said. "Not just remembering past lives, but actually seeing the eternal nature of what we are to each other. When bodies touch with this level of consciousness, with this awareness of the spiritual truth beneath the physical form, the spiritual plane responds. It's like the universe itself is witnessing our love and celebrating it." They sat in that state of heightened awareness for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, and Marina began to understand something profound about the nature of human connection. Physical touch between two people who shared a deep soul bond wasn't just a biological act. It was a form of meditation, a gateway to spiritual experience, a moment when the veil between worlds became so thin it was almost transparent. She could see now why certain spiritual traditions spoke of sacred sexuality, of tantric practices, of the divine meeting the human through physical union. It wasn't superstition or poetry, it was literal truth. When two souls who had loved each other across lifetimes touched with full awareness of their eternal nature, they created a tremor in the fabric of reality itself, a ripple that extended into the spiritual plane and sent light cascading through dimensions invisible to ordinary perception. As they walked home that evening, hand in hand, Marina shared her insights with Gabriel, and he listened with the quiet attention he had learned to give her spiritual revelations. "So every time we touch," he said slowly, working through the implications, "we're not just two people in this moment. We're all the versions of ourselves we've ever been, reaching across time to connect again." Marina nodded, tears of joy streaming down her face. "And not just who we've been, but who we'll become. Our love doesn't exist in linear time, Gabriel. It exists in all times simultaneously, in all the moments we've shared and will share, across all worlds and dimensions. That's why it feels so powerful, so inevitable, so much bigger than just us. Because it is." They reached their front door, where they could hear Ethan inside playing music, their son who was the living embodiment of their eternal bond, and Gabriel pulled Marina close, kissing her forehead with a tenderness that carried the weight of 3 lifetimes and the promise of countless more to come. Ethan graduated from high school and prepared to leave for college, and with his departure approaching, Marina and Gabriel found themselves reflecting on the incredible journey their family had traveled together. The young man packing boxes in his room was no longer the ethereal child who had seen spirits in corners or spoken wisdom beyond his years. He had grown into a grounded, compassionate person who carried his spiritual awareness quietly, like a secret strength rather than a burden. One evening, a week before his departure, Ethan asked his parents to sit with him in the living room because there was something he needed to tell them. Marina's heart clenched with familiar worry. Had something happened? Was he having second thoughts about college? But when Ethan began to speak, his words carried a gravity that had nothing to do with ordinary concerns. "I've been having dreams again," Ethan said, his voice steady but his eyes revealing deeper emotion. "Not like when I was little, but different. In these dreams, I can see the silver threads that connect us, actual threads of light that tie our souls together. And I can see that those threads don't break when we're apart physically. They stretch across any distance, across any plane of existence. I needed to tell you this before I leave because I know you're both worried about me going away, about our family changing. But Mom, Dad, we're connected by something that can't be broken by distance or time or even death. The silver threads are eternal." Marina felt tears spring to her eyes, and Gabriel's hand found hers automatically, their fingers intertwining with the familiar comfort of 15 years of marriage and countless lifetimes of love. Ethan continued, leaning forward with an intensity that reminded them of the old soul he had always been. "I understand now why I had to come back to you both, why I waited so long in the spiritual plane for the right moment. It wasn't just to complete our family or heal past wounds, it was to be a witness, to be living proof that the spiritual teachings you've learned aren't just beliefs, they're truth. When I go to college and eventually build my own life, I'll be pulling on these silver threads, stretching them but never breaking them. And someday, when this life ends for all of us and we return to the spiritual plane, we'll gather those threads back up and see the beautiful pattern they created, not just in this life, but across all the lives we've shared and will share." He smiled then, that radiant smile that had always seemed to carry light from another world. "So don't be sad when I leave. I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just exploring another part of the pattern we're all weaving together. It simply entered a new chapter, as all soul stories do. They continue to live, love, and walk between worlds, their connection growing deeper with each passing year, each shared meditation, each moment of recognizing the eternal nature of what they are to each other. But their story isn't just theirs alone. It's a mirror held up to every person who has ever felt that inexplicable pull towards someone, every heart that has ever whispered, 'I know you,' to a stranger, every soul that has ever wondered if love could truly transcend the boundaries of a single lifetime. The truth that Marina discovered through her journey between the physical and spiritual planes is this. We are all connected by silver threads, invisible to most but absolutely real. Every person you've ever loved deeply, every soul you've felt drawn to without logical reason, every relationship that feels bigger than this moment. These are not accidents or coincidences. They are appointments made before birth, contracts written in the spiritual plane, promises that souls make to find each other again, to help each other grow, to complete together what was left unfinished in previous existences. Life after death isn't about harps and clouds or fire and brimstone. It's about continuation, evolution, and the eternal dance of souls learning to love more fully, forgive more completely, and recognize more clearly the divine spark in one another. The spiritual plane, according to Spiritism, teaches us that we return again and again, not as punishment but as opportunity, each lifetime a chance to heal old wounds, balance old debts, and deepen the connections that matter most. Marina's ability to perceive this truth directly, Gabriel's courage to believe what his heart knew even when his mind doubted, and Ethan's role as living proof of reincarnation, together they offer us something precious: hope. Hope that the people we've lost aren't really gone, just waiting in another room. Hope that the love we carry isn't wasted when relationships end, but saved and strengthened for future reunions. Hope that death is not a wall but a door, not an ending but a transformation, not goodbye but until we meet again. So I ask you now, who in your life feels like more than coincidence? Who have you met and thought, "I know you from somewhere, though we've never met before"? What dreams have you had that felt less like imagination and more like memory? What voice have you heard in meditation or in the quiet moments before sleep that seemed to come from beyond this world? Pay attention to these moments, because they might be your own silver threads calling to you, your own soul family reaching across the veil to remind you that you are never alone, never truly separated from those you love, never without purpose or connection. If this story touched something deep within you, if it awakened memories you can't quite name or stirred questions you've been afraid to ask, then do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because there are more stories like this, more testimonies to the eternal nature of love and the reality of the spiritual plane. Second, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, perhaps someone grieving, someone searching, someone who has always felt that there must be more to existence than what we can see with physical eyes. And third, take a moment right now to close your eyes and feel for those silver threads connecting you to the souls who matter most. They're there. They've always been there. And they will always be there, through every life, every world, every moment of eternity. The veil between worlds is thinner than you think. Love is stronger than death. And your soul, like Marina's, like Gabriel's, like Ethan's, is on an eternal journey of return. Returning to love, returning to truth, returning home to the ones who have been waiting for you across lifetimes, across dimensions, across the infinite expanse of existence itself. Welcome home. Welcome to the truth. Welcome to the understanding that you are eternal, you are loved, and you are never, ever alone.